Sometimes you just have to take whatever you got, strip it down, and start from the beginning. So it's Monday afternoon, the day before the 4th of July holiday here in the States, and it's thunderstorming. There's not really anything to do outside, so I figured, hey, this would be a good time to go through my pedal board and figure out what I need, what I don't need, get rid of some stuff. The new pedal board is going to be built around the Helix Stomp XL. I've used that before live, and it was a part of the previous build of my pedal board, but now I'm going to add a few things to it and also use some of the control features and some of the MIDI features to be able to control external effects or whatever else I'm going to be using live. So it's been a couple days since I tore down my pedal board. I've been thinking about what I'm going to do with the new build. And again, I'm going to be using the HX Stomp kind of as the brains of the whole pedal board. Again, it's not exactly what I would call dirt cheap, but I do think it's the best value of the Helix modeler line. The reason is you get the functionality, or most of the functionality, of the full Helix for roughly half the price, but you also get the extra buttons and some things that the HX Stomp, the small Stomp, does not have, including having all the connections along the back. And so it has a few things the small Stomp does not have. I think this gives you all of the functionality. If you do have the small Stomp, you can get extra buttons because you can use the MIDI connection for it. But I went with this one because of the having the extra buttons, one less thing to add, and to get around some of the limitations that this has compared to the full-size Helix. I'm going to be adding extra pedals to kind of fill in some of the gaps, because as you add effects to your patches, it's going to kind of max out the processor in here. So essentially it's got one of the processors, whereas the full-size Helix has two, and things like Reverb, some of the more advanced amp models, they can use a lot more processing power, but there's some ways around that. So I'm sitting here editing this video, and I realize that a lot of you probably have no experience with the Helix family or any kind of modeling software, and talking about blocks was probably kind of confusing. So I wanted to come in and just shoot this short clip so you can kind of see the software that I'm looking at when I'm actually programming the unit. So what I have up and running on my computer is the HX Edit software. And you'll see that across the top here, there's a bunch of these little squares, and each one of these represents a place that you can put an effect, whether it's some kind of delay or reverb or anything like that. And depending on what you add, you'll see that already I've got one choice of delay here that is grayed out. I can't pick it. And the reason is, as you add things, it's going to tax the system even more, the processor in it. So let's see if we have something here that has a little bit more processing power. So we'll come in here, and so I go to my empty block, and then I come down and pick what I want to add. And you can see there's 2 or 3 different things that are grayed out because it's doesn't have enough processing power to add some of these more advanced effects. So let me throw this delay on, and now once I do that, there's going to be even more things grayed out because I'm using the processor more. So what I want to do with my pedal board is have a few things in the effects loop, which I can go in and tell it when to use the effects loop and not. So I can come in here and use the effects loop and the effects loop return, so I can tell it where to put it. So we can do effects loop here, left and right. If we want stereo, that's a separate thing. and I can go through and tell it which button I want to turn that effects loop on and off. So I can actually take some of the pedals out of that effects loop while I'm using it. So what this allows me to do is to get rid of some of these blocks, and now when I go back in and say I want to add something special, more of those things are available to me. Or if I want to do like some of the pitch stuff, typically any of the sound effects like pitch shifting, making it sound like an acoustic guitar or a 12-string guitar, these all require a lot of more processing than some of the other things. So in order to get all of these to show up, I have to go in and get rid of stuff to have enough processing power to be able to run some of these. So for certain patches, I'll be able to do this because things that normally would have been handled by the Stomp, I can go in and then have those different things handled by the effects loop. Also with amps and cabinets on these units, you can have the amp and the cabinet as one thing, or you can have one block for an amplifier and another block for a cabinet. That also uses more processing power. So I just wanted to put this in here to kind of clear up any confusion about what the Helix actually does and what it doesn't do. And hopefully this will make the rest of the video a little bit more understandable. Now back to the video. So what I'm probably going to do is add a reverb either in the effects loop of the Helix or at the end of the chain. I'm designing this pedal board to be as universally functional as possible, meaning that I can run it in the front of an amp, I can use what's called the 4-cable method, or I can run straight to front of house, because sometimes you're in a situation where it's a quick changeover, you may or may not have a backline, you may just have something that you're going to the front of house or to monitors. This will probably go in the effects loop because it does have balanced out on the Helix, so you can run straight to a PA. There's a couple of caveats with that. If you're playing somewhere and the PA has phantom power, you may want to use a direct box to kind of isolate that from the XL. I've heard a few stories online of people having issues with phantom power messing up the unit. I have not experienced that, but then I've also been careful about, if the front of house is using any kind of phantom powered mics or anything. So this one is the Boss Reverb RV6. This thing is ridiculous for what it can do for the price. It's not really in the realm of dirt cheap. There are cheaper options out there, but this pretty much covers all the bases, and it's stereo, which this does have a stereo effects loop. You just have to have the splitter because it's a stereo connection for the SIN. So I will probably put that in there. The only downside to this is that you can't control it externally by changing any presets. There's no save presets with it. So it's really good for having just an all-around reverb that you can free up one of the slots in the programming on the Helix. Another thing I'll probably put in the effects loop before the reverb is a delay. Now, this is a DD5. They don't make these anymore. The reason I like this one is it's a digital delay, but it has a tap tempo input on it. Just these two effects in the effects loop of the Helix will free up a lot of processing power, so you can devote that more towards having a really good amp sound in the unit. Another thing I'm going to be adding is the tuner. This is the Boss TU3. If you catch my video, and I'll put a link above to where I use this as my power supply as well, you have to have a separate special power adapter to make this work that way, but you can daisy chain the power to the other Boss pedals and a couple others that I'm going to be showing you. So this is kind of serving two purposes. It gives me a really good tuner, which these tend to be a little bit better than the clip-ons as far as accuracy, and it gives me a power supply. So one of the other things that I'm probably going to add is the Soul Food from Electro Harmonics. This is their version of a Klon, which again, the Klon Overdrives are the ones that are around $5,000 now online. I mean, this comes really, really close, but you have to understand that some of the Klons sound differently depending on which one you happen to get. So there's obviously a silver version, there's a gold version, there's one that has the horse on the logo. On its own, this sounds pretty good for the money. I bought this one used, and this can be used as an overdrive, and it works really well with the Helix. The Helix has a lot of amp-like qualities when it comes to how it responds to having an overdrive like this in front of it. And so I'll probably put this immediately after the tuner. So those are the pedals that I'm 99.9% sure I'm actually going to put on the pedal board. But I have a few other options, and that's why I'm kind of turning to some of you to give some suggestions. And let me show you some of the things that I have to choose from. I could put a fuzz in there. I'm a little iffy on the fuzzes in the Helix. They're okay, they're workable, but a fuzz that again would go before the tuner, because as I talked about in the video that I did about this fuzz from Behringer, it reacts a lot with the guitar and the pickups in the guitar and the impedance of the pickups. So anything between this and your guitar can kind of affect the sound. What do you guys think? I mean, is this something that would be a good addition? I also have the Mod Tone fuzz, which is kind of a dirt cheap fuzz. I also bought this one used. It's kind of, depending on how you set it, to me it sounds kind of like it could be, you know, a fuzz face, and if you set it another way, it's a little bit more like a big muff. Fuzzes run the gamut. I mean, it's hard to say that one fuzz sounds like something because they all can sound very different, even same models. Other overdrives. I have the Bad Monkey. I haven't done a video on this yet, but I'm going to, especially since JHS, Josh Scott over at JSS Pedals, did a video on this, and it blew the prices through the roof temporarily, as usual. But this is basically kind of a souped up version of the Ibanez Tube Screamer. The big difference is that this actually has a separate out that simulates a speaker. I've talked about in other videos how you always want to have backups of backups, because, you know, if you're out playing gigs, things will go wrong. This might save you in a gig if for some reason the stomp goes down and you don't have a way to get anything to front of house. This might do it in a pinch. I haven't tried it yet to see how well it sounds. I'm going to kind of play around with that in the video. But these always sound good in front of Fender amps that kind of have that mid-scoop sound. Let me know what you think. I also have the Danelectro Daddy-O. This is basically a clone of a Marshall Governor, and of course Marshall's re-released their entire line, you know, and they're kind of expensive right now. You can still get these you know, for not a lot of money. The big difference is that these, just like the Governor, has separate bass, treble, and mid controls. So you can go in and kind of tailor the sound if you want to radically change the sound or just beef it up. You know, it'll kind of give you that Marshall in a box, so to speak, kind of sound. Anyway, let me know what you think about that. So one of the other pedals that I've been thinking about is the Line 6 M5. And this is basically a stomp box modeler. The cool things about this, or why I'm thinking about this, is that it can do a lot of different things. So I can put this in the effects loop of the Helix and use it to replace several different types of pedals. Also, it has MIDI connections, and I can use the Helix to switch the effect settings or change it to a different preset, at least, from the Helix. I've done stuff with MIDI before, but this is the first time I'm gonna kind of dive down the rabbit hole of MIDI from the Helix to this pedal. I'm sure there will be a little bit of frustration with that. The cool thing about having things in the effects loop with the Helix is that you can turn that effects loop on and off and assign that to a switch. So if I have a pedal that maybe is a little bit noisy, if I'm not using it, I can use the Helix almost like a mini switcher and turn that loop off completely. And any of the pedals that are there, it won't send the signal through what's in the loop, which can kind of help out with if you have some noise issues. Let me know what you think about this. I'm not 100% on this because this does take up a bit of real estate on the pedal board, and you know, depending on what else I add, I might get to a point where this just takes up too much space. It does have some really good sounds. There are certain things it does better than others. Certainly the reverbs and some of the like tape emulation effects, it's decent on. And again, each one of those things will take some of the processing load off of the main processor in the Helix, so I can focus more on having a better amp sound or a better speaker cabinet mic emulation, or loading different impulse responses. So let me know your thoughts on a pedal board rebuild. What would be the most bang for the buck out of what I've shown you, or perhaps there's something I haven't heard about that I'm not aware of that, you know, is going to give me the most bang for the buck. Everything kind of has to be budget conscious, as we all kind of are these days. But I need something that is going to be very flexible, because you never know what kind of gigs are going to pop up and what you're going to have to do. So I need to be able to emulate a ton of different sounds. Back when I was playing in a band doing all originals, I didn't have to use as many different guitar sounds because we basically had a sound that we were using for the record, and there was just different versions of that sound, typically a cranked Marshall kind of overdrive sound that would either clean up or get dirtier and maybe, you know, add a reverb or some digital effects or digital delays. This, I need it to be able to do a lot of different things, cover a lot of different ground from a sonic standpoint. I value your opinions, and you might, you know, again, think of something that I haven't even begun to think of. Anyway, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't, subscribe and hit that bell icon so you'll be notified whenever I post new content or go live, which is something that I'm working on now, getting all the streaming stuff set so that I can do live. And if you have any suggestions for other videos, just leave it in the comments below, or you can shoot me. You know, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok. You know, follow the links below. And again, until next time, keep practicing.